So I feel like we hear the term test anxiety thrown around a lot on campus, but what's the big picture here? Like, how common is it really, and what does it do to students?
It's actually more prevalent than people might think. Research suggests that up to 35% of college students experience test anxiety at some point. And that's not just feeling nervous before an exam, it's a combination of intense worry, physical symptoms like a racing heart, and even negative thoughts that can totally derail their performance.
Whoa, that's like over a third of students. I mean, I knew exams were stressful, but I didn't get how much of an actual barrier this could be. So, what do they usually do about it?
Well, traditional approaches have been around for a while. Think breathing techniques and progressive muscle relaxation, or PMR. These methods fall under cognitive behavioral strategies, which aim to help students actively control their body's stress response, often by practicing self awareness and relaxation techniques.
Got it. So, like those take a deep breath moments or tensing and releasing your muscles during a study break. Do those actually work?
They do, absolutely. Studies have shown they can lower state anxiety, so the immediate stress students feel before an exam. But here's the catch: these techniques often rely on students practicing them regularly to really sink in. It's not something you can just do once and expect results. And for some, the learning curve might make them less appealing.
Ah, that makes sense. So, what happens if you're in crunch mode, like 5 minutes before a quiz? Is there anything faster?
This is where sensory modulation comes in as an interesting alternative. It focuses more on a bottom up approach, meaning it taps directly into the nervous system to calm the body without requiring as much conscious effort. Techniques like the dive reflex, which uses cold water on the face, or weighted objects for pressure, are the kinds of ideas we're talking about here.
Wait, cold water on your face? That sounds intense. But okay, it's intriguing. How's that different from the traditional stuff?
It's primarily about how the body responds. Instead of relying on practiced awareness, these sensory approaches use physical inputs to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, the one that calms you down almost immediately. And because they don't need much training or prep, they can be used last minute, right before something stressful like a test.
Huh, I think I see it now. So, sensory modulation isn't just trendy, it's more like a shortcut. I'm curious. Have these techniques been compared to things like PMR?
Great question, Tim. I worked on a study with the support of Carolyn Fitzgibbon and Julie O'Sullivan that looked at traditional techniques like breathing exercises and PMR versus sensory based interventions, including the dive reflex and weighted objects. The results showed that both approaches effectively reduce test related anxiety, but the sensory based methods seem to provide longer lasting relief.
Longer lasting? Like, how much longer are we talking?
Well, while the breathing techniques in PMR worked really well in the moment, their effects tended to fade more quickly after the anxiety provoking event, a quiz in this case. On the other hand, techniques like the dive reflex and weighted objects showed a sustained reduction even after the event. That's what makes them so compelling, especially for students who might not practice traditional techniques regularly.
Okay, so it's not just about what works best in the moment, but what keeps you calm longer. That makes sense, but why is that the case? I mean, what's going on here?
It ties into how these interventions impact the nervous system. Traditional approaches like breathing engage both top down and bottom up mechanisms, meaning you consciously manage how your body responds while triggering physical relaxation. Sensory based methods, though, are almost purely bottom up. They bypass the need for conscious mental effort and directly influence your body's stress responses via the parasympathetic nervous system.
Wait, hang on. Bottom up versus top down? Can you like break that down a bit more?
Of course, think of top down like giving your brain the reins. You tell your body to relax through focused breathing or thinking calming thoughts. It's effective, but it takes practice. Bottom up, on the other hand, is like giving your body an automatic shutdown switch. For example, the dive reflex uses cold water to stimulate your face's nerves, which triggers a physiological response that lowers your heart rate and calms you down. No conscious effort needed.
Whoa, so it's like a hack for stress. But doesn't everyone handle anxiety differently? How do they measure if these different techniques work?
Great question. Our study used a combination of measures, ones that focused on overall emotional distress called global anxiety, and others that looked at physical symptoms like tension and heart rate. Here's where it gets interesting. The sensory focused techniques seem to show better results in measures tied to physical symptoms over time. But the traditional methods appeared to work stronger initially for immediate relief of emotional distress.
So it's like the results depend on which type of anxiety you're looking at?
Exactly. And that brings up an important point about how different techniques might fit different scenarios or even different people. But that's just scratching the surface. There's more to consider when integrating these into broader programs. And that variability is why applying sensory modulation techniques really comes down to tailoring them to the individual. Some people respond strongly to one type of sensory input, while others might find a completely different approach works better for them. It's a bit of trial and error, but that process of discovery is crucial. It's about finding what truly clicks for each person in their unique circumstance.
It makes sense. I mean, back when my mom had OT after her stroke, her therapist was all about finding what worked for her, not just going through standard exercises. It was really personalized, which I always thought was cool.
Absolutely. That's the same mindset here. Whether it's a weighted lap object, the dive reflex, or even simpler strategies like chewing gum or bouncing your leg for proprioceptive input, it's about giving students tools that feel manageable and meaningful to them.
Okay, but pulling this into a university setting, what can faculty do? I mean, most of us aren't experts in this stuff. How do we help without overstepping?
Great question. Faculty play a huge role by creating an environment that acknowledges test anxiety and offers options. Even simple gestures like allowing students to use small fidget tools during tests or providing access to quiet spaces for pre exam relaxation can make a big difference. And of course, sharing resources, pointing students to campus counseling, or introducing these concepts during class discussions can normalize anxiety management strategies.
That's a good point. But what about other campus roles like learning advisors or coaches? Where do they fit in?
They're critical. Learning specialists can incorporate sensory modulation into academic coaching sessions, helping students practice these techniques before exams. Advisors and coaches can also help students identify strategies that align with their goals. For instance, a student struggling with high anxiety might benefit from trying a weighted item before a test, and a coach could check in on how that worked afterward.
So it's really a collaborative effort then between faculty, support staff, and the students themselves.
Exactly. It's about layering these supports so that students aren't navigating this alone. And when they see multiple touch points, professors, advisors, and counselors working together, it reinforces the idea that managing anxiety is a shared effort, not something they have to figure out on their own.
I like that. Kind of like a team approach. And honestly, tying it back to my mom's experience, when everyone lined up around her goals, the outcomes were just better, you know?
It's really no different here. The more connected and individualized the support, the more empowered the student feels. And that empowerment is what helps them develop not just better anxiety management, but truly long term success strategies.
On that note, this has been such an eye opener for me. Thinking not just about anxiety solutions, but also about how adaptable and personal these approaches can be.
It really is a fascinating area to look into. Thanks for exploring this with me. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.